In 1950, a tall, handsome young man from Tennessee walked into a Nashville studio with nothing but raw talent and a dream. Within just 5 years, he would command stages across America, outselling many of the biggest names in country music. Yet today, when fans discuss the legends of the genre, his name often goes unmentioned. Carl Smith, the man with the golden voice and movie star looks, sold his guitars, packed his bags, and vanished from the music scene at the peak of his career. While his former wife June Carter and her husband Johnny Cash became household names, Smith chose a path that left industry insiders wondering what makes a genuine star turn his back on fame and fortune. The tale of Carl Smith isn't just about music. It's about choosing contentment over celebrity, about a family legacy that would influence country music for decades, and about a man who decided some things are worth more than seeing your name in lights. The year was 1927 in the hills of Maynardville, Tennessee, where life moved slow and money was scarce. Carl Smith entered the world. His family didn't have much, but what they lacked in wealth they made up for with music. Every Saturday night, young Carl would huddle around their family radio, listening to the Grand Ole Opry. The sounds of Roy Acuff, Ernest Tubb, and Bill Monroe filled their small living room and planted seeds in a boy who couldn't yet afford an instrument. Those radio stars had no idea they were inspiring a future legend in a farmhouse miles from Nashville. But Carl Smith wasn't about to let circumstances determine his future. When other boys were playing sports or doing chores, he was working odd jobs, saving every penny that crossed his palm. He mowed lawns, delivered newspapers, swept floors at local shops, all for a single purpose: to buy a guitar and learn to play. Those hard-earned dollars weren't just building a bank account, they were building a foundation for greatness. By age 15, his perseverance had paid off. Carl wasn't just strumming chords, he was performing with local bands, setting stages alight with a voice beyond his years. Imagine it, a teenager, barely old enough to drive, holding his own with seasoned musicians. But life had other plans for him. Before music could claim his full attention, World War II came calling. In 1944, that promising young musician exchanged his guitar pick for a sailor's uniform. For 3 years, he served his country aboard Navy ships far from the Tennessee hills he called home. But those years weren't lost, they were transformative. The discipline of military service, the camaraderie with fellow sailors, the rhythm of ocean waves all became part of who he was. When he returned home in 1947, he wasn't just Carl Smith, the small-town musician anymore. He was Carl Smith, the veteran. Carl Smith, the man with stories to tell. Carl Smith, who was destined to change country music forever. Back in Tennessee, local radio became his launching pad. Every morning before sunrise, he'd arrive at WROL to perform live, then race across town for another show at WDXL. Some days he'd perform at 3 different stations, playing until his fingers ached and his throat was raw. But listeners were starting to notice. They'd call the stations asking about that smooth-voiced singer whose songs felt like stories told just for them. And then came the moment every country musician dreams of: his first performance on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry, the very show he'd grown up listening to through that old family radio. Standing backstage waiting to perform, he surely thought about that wide-eyed boy who once pressed his ear to the speaker. Now, he wasn't just hearing the music, he was about to become part of its history. The journey that took Carl Smith from those humble Tennessee beginnings to country stardom is remarkable enough. But what happened when Columbia Records finally noticed him? Well, that's where the story gets truly fascinating. That Columbia Records contract in 1950 wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a match to dynamite. His voice soon poured from radios across America, and his first hit was about to announce the arrival of a new kind of country star. When Let's Live a Little soared to number 2 on the Billboard charts in 1951, industry insiders knew something special was happening. But it wasn't just Smith's voice that captured attention. His backing band, the Toonsmiths, featured steel guitarist Johnny Silbert. Together, They weren't just playing country music, they were transforming it, blending honky-tonk with Western swing, creating something both traditional and revolutionary. When they performed, crowds didn't just listen, they became part of something electric. The combination of Smith's smooth baritone and Silbert's innovative steel guitar created a sound that resonated with audiences everywhere. The hits began falling like summer rain. Let Old Mother Nature Have Her Way topped the charts, becoming an instant classic. Are You Teasing Me had fans from coast to coast singing along. This World We Live In became the soundtrack to countless love stories. Each release climbed higher than the last, and by mid-decade, Carl Smith wasn't just recording songs, he was creating country music anthems. 30 top 10 hits in a single decade. Numbers that didn't just make you famous, they made you legendary. His appearances at the Grand Ole Opry became events. Fans would line up for hours hoping to see the man they called Mr. Country. When he took the stage, energy would surge through the audience. Here was a performer who understood that country music wasn't just about melodies. It was about connecting with people's lives and emotion. Every performance, he'd step into that circle of light on the Opry stage, and for a few precious minutes, everyone in that room felt like he was singing directly to them. But while everyone else was watching the charts, Carl was watching something else entirely. He saw how the industry was evolving, how rockabilly was emerging, and how the Nashville sound was beginning to take shape. He didn't want to simply follow trends, he wanted to shape them. His concerts weren't just shows, they were masterful demonstrations of what country music could be. The way he balanced tradition with innovation wasn't just impressive, it was visionary. Those who worked alongside him during this period tell stories about a man who never settled for second best. In recording sessions, he'd insist on take after take until every note was exactly right. Producers remember sessions lasting until dawn because Smith could hear something in the mix that others couldn't catch. On stage, his performances looked effortless because he'd rehearsed until perfection became natural. This wasn't mere perfectionism, it was respect for the music and the fans who embraced it. By 1956, Carl Smith wasn't just successful, he was Mr. Country, a title earned through unwavering dedication to his craft. His influence echoed through the songs of countless artists who studied his style and tried to capture that special magic he brought to every performance. But success changes things. It opens doors you never imagined and sometimes closes ones you thought would always remain open. And for Carl, those changes were approaching fast. Standing at the pinnacle of country music, looking out at a landscape of gold records and sold-out shows, Carl Smith faced a decision. The kind that doesn't just alter a career, it transforms a life. And speaking of life-altering moments, the story of how he navigated fame while building a personal life is where this tale becomes truly remarkable. When Carl Smith met June Carter backstage at the Grand Ole Opry in 1951, it wasn't just a casual introduction. It was a meeting that would shape country music history. June, daughter of Mother Maybelle Carter, was already making her mark with her musical talent and comedic flair. Their romance was intense, immediate, and set against the backdrop of Nashville's golden age. They married in 1952, becoming country music's new power couple. Their voices complemented each other perfectly on duets like Time's A-Wastin' and Love, Oh Crazy Love. When they performed together, audiences witnessed something special. Two artists connected through music and love. Their chemistry was undeniable, their harmony perfect. The birth of their daughter Carleen in 1955 seemed to complete their storybook romance. But the demanding reality of life on tour isn't kind to fairy tales. The constant traveling, the pressure to deliver hit after hit, and the challenge of balancing family with stardom began wearing them down. The passion that brought them together eventually pulled them apart. By 1956, their marriage had ended, sending ripples through Nashville's close-knit music community. Yet sometimes endings lead to unexpected new beginnings. Enter Goldie Hill, the talented singer known for her hit, I Let the Stars Get in My Eyes. She wasn't just another performer, she was a force of nature with a powerful voice and independent spirit. When she and Carl began performing together, something clicked. Their musical styles matched perfectly, but more importantly, they understood each other on a deeper level. Their marriage in 1957 marked a fresh start. Together, they raised 3 children, Carl Jr., Larry Dean, and Lori Lynn. Their home became a place where music and family life blended seamlessly. Goldie recognized something essential about Carl, his need for balance between public acclaim and private contentment. Meanwhile, June Carter's path led her to Johnny Cash, creating an intricate web of connections between 3 of country music's most significant figures. The intertwined histories of Smith, Carter, and Cash would influence country music for generations to come. Their children grew up in a world where music wasn't just entertainment, it was the family business. But as the 1950s drew to a close, Carl Smith was wrestling with questions that would define his future. The music business was evolving rapidly. Elvis Presley had changed everything, and the polished Nashville sound was transforming country music's identity. Some artists chased these new trends, but Carl had always followed his own instincts. In 1956, he made a decision that stunned many. He departed from the Grand Ole Opry. For a country star in the 1950s, leaving the Opry was like a cardinal leaving Rome. But Carl recognized opportunities beyond those hallowed walls. The Philip Morris Country Music Show offered him freedom to tour on his terms, reaching audiences across America. His children remember these years with affection, their father returning from tours, guitar case in hand, eager to share stories from the road. Despite his growing fame, he remained grounded, teaching his children values that went beyond the glitter of show business. The Smith family farm in Franklin, Tennessee became his refuge, a place where he could simply be himself, away from spotlights and backstage politics. As the 1960s approached, Carl Smith stood at another crossroads. The industry that had made him famous was changing dramatically, and he needed to decide whether to change with it or chart his own course. But before we explore that crucial decision, let's examine how he expanded his entertainment career beyond music, because that's where his story takes an intriguing turn. While most country artists stayed in their lane, Carl Smith recognized opportunities beyond rhinestone suits and radio plays. 1957 marked his silver screen debut in The Badge of Marshall Brennan. Here was a singer who could genuinely act, not just play himself under a different name. His natural charisma translated perfectly to film, and he followed with Buffalo Gun, proving his acting talent was no fluke. The late 1950s and early 1960s saw Carl Smith reinventing himself in ways that would have amazed even his ambitious younger self. When he became host of Carl Smith's Country Music Hall on Canadian television, he brought something fresh to broadcasting. This wasn't just another music show, it was a showcase for how to evolve while honoring your roots. His recordings during this period reflected this evolution. The Western swing elements that had always influenced his sound now took center stage. Working with talented musicians, he created arrangements that respected tradition while pushing boundaries. Songs like 10,000 Drums and There's Nothing as Sweet as My Baby demonstrated an artist willing to experiment, even if it meant challenging listeners' expectations. But perhaps the most unexpected chapter in Carl Smith's story began when he discovered a passion completely separate from entertainment. On his Franklin, Tennessee farm, he began raising cutting horses. These weren't ordinary horses, but specially trained athletes that worked with cattle, requiring precision, intelligence, and perfect timing. The meticulous attention to detail that made him a recording perfectionist now found expression in breeding and training these remarkable animals. This transition makes perfect sense when you think about it. The discipline needed for training cutting horses paralleled the dedication required to perfect a song. Both demanded patience, understanding, and an appreciation for the art of timing. His farm evolved from a simple retreat into a respected operation in the cutting horse community. By the late 1970s, the boy who once pressed his ear against a radio speaker dreaming of the Grand Ole Opry had achieved everything he'd imagined and discovered passions he never knew existed. The music industry continued changing, with the outlaw movement gaining momentum and pop country becoming mainstream. But Carl Smith wasn't chasing relevance anymore. He'd found something that provided the same fulfillment as music without the relentless pressure to remain current. What makes this period particularly fascinating is how Smith managed his gradual retreat from stardom while preserving his legacy. He didn't simply vanish, he made a deliberate choice to step back on his own terms. His occasional performances during these years became special events, each one reminding audiences why they called him Mr. Country. The music establishment couldn't ignore his contributions, even as he focused more on horses than hit records. His influence resonated through countless artists who followed his path, often without realizing it. His smooth vocal delivery, perfect phrasing, and storytelling ability became embedded in country music's foundation. But what motivates someone to walk away from fame when they still have more to give? The answer lies in understanding Carl Smith's true priorities and how those values would shape not just his legacy, but country music's future through generations of his family. Speaking of legacy, the way the music world eventually acknowledged his contributions reveals something profound about how success can be measured in ways that transcend chart positions and record sales. The Country Music Hall of Fame opened its doors to Carl Smith in 2003, though by then he was more likely to be found in his barn than on any stage. It wasn't just another award, it was recognition that sometimes the greatest impact comes from knowing when to step away. That induction ceremony brought together figures from every era of country music, each with stories about how Carl Smith had touched their lives. His daughter Carleen Carter's voice trembled as she spoke about her father. She wasn't just honoring a country music pioneer. She was celebrating the man who taught her that authenticity matters more than applause. But then she had established her own impressive career, proving that musical talent ran deep in the family. The Smith-Carter-Cash musical dynasty had reshaped country music in ways no one could have predicted when Carl first signed with Columbia Records. But his daughter wasn't the only one carrying forward his legacy. Every young artist who dared to blend traditional country with progressive sounds was walking a path Carl Smith had helped clear. His early experiments mixing honky-tonk with western swing had demonstrated that country music could evolve without losing its soul. In recording studios across Nashville, engineers still referenced the Carl Smith standard, that relentless pursuit of the perfect take. The Cutting Horse community, too, had their own Carl Smith stories. They didn't discuss his hit records or television appearances. They talked about his eye for quality stock, his patience with difficult horses, his understanding that excellence takes time and cannot be rushed. The trophies his horses won stood proudly alongside his gold records, each representing a different kind of excellence he pursued. When Carl Smith passed away on January 16, 2010, at his beloved farm in Franklin, Tennessee, obituaries attempted to capture his essence. They listed his 30 top 10 hits, mentioned his marriages to June Carter and Goldie Hill, noted his work in film and television, but they missed something essential, the way he demonstrated that life after stardom could be fulfilling, that stepping away at the right time could be as powerful a statement as holding on. His influence continues to echo through country music in unexpected ways. Today's country stars might not cite him directly as an influence, but every time they balance commercial appeal with artistic integrity, they're following his example. When they prioritize family alongside career, they're addressing the same questions Carl Smith answered in his own distinctive way. The true measure of his legacy isn't found in statistics, impressive though they are. It's not in awards, though they were well-deserved. It's in showing that success isn't just about reaching the summit. It's about what you do once you've arrived. His journey from selling seeds to buy his first guitar to selling out venues across America, from listening to the Grand Ole Opry on a crackling radio to becoming one of its brightest stars, that was just the beginning. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Carl Smith's story is what it reveals about authenticity in an industry built on image and perception. Here was a man who reached country music's highest peaks, then walked away to raise horses because it brought him joy. He didn't need comebacks, didn't chase relevance. He had discovered something more valuable than fame. He had found contentment. Today, when visitors explore the Country Music Hall of Fame, they'll find Carl Smith's plaque among other legends, but to truly understand his legacy, they need to look beyond those walls, to the artists who follow their own vision, to the performers who define success on their own terms, and to a family that continues making music with authenticity and passion. The story of Carl Smith, Mr. Country himself, isn't just about what he accomplished. It's about the courage to define success differently. That determined boy from Maynardville could never have imagined how far his dreams would carry him. 30 top 10 hits, countless performances, films, television shows, and a legacy that continues shaping country music today. But Carl Smith's greatest achievement wasn't found in the music he created. It was in demonstrating that true success means having the courage to follow your heart wherever it leads. The title Mr. Country proved too limiting for a man who refused to be defined by a single pursuit. While contemporaries fought to remain relevant and chase changing trends, Carl Smith chose a different path. He exchanged spotlights for sunshine, stage doors for stable doors, and discovered that sometimes the most meaningful songs are those never recorded. His story challenges our fundamental understanding of what success in the entertainment industry means. His influence lives on through his children, especially Carleen Carter, who inherited not just his musical gifts but his independent spirit. The extended Smith-Carter-Cash family tree has grown into a musical dynasty, each branch adding distinctive notes to the country music songbook. But more importantly, they inherited his understanding that there's more to life than performance. Each generation has learned to balance artistry with authenticity, stardom with sincerity, just as Carl did. The ripple effects of his choices continue shaping country music in subtle yet significant ways. When today's artists step back from touring to focus on family, they're following a path Carl Smith helped create. When performers choose artistic vision over commercial trends, they're drawing from his example. Even as country music evolves with each generation, the principles he embodied, authenticity, excellence, and balance, remain as relevant as ever. His legacy extends beyond music. In the cutting horse community, stories of his dedication still circulate. They speak of how he approached horse training with the same perfectionism he once brought to recording studios. Each carefully selected bloodline, each meticulously trained horse, represents a different kind of achievement, measured not in record sales but in the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Look around Nashville today and you'll find Carl Smith's influence everywhere. In artists who blend tradition with innovation, in performers who value family alongside fame, in producers who demand excellence. His impact isn't just in the music, it's in the way artists approach their careers, their families, their lives long after the applause fades. Sometimes a person's true measure isn't found in how long they remain in the spotlight, but in what they accomplish after stepping out of it. Carl Smith showed us that reinvention isn't about changing your image or your sound. It's about having the courage to follow your heart, even when it leads down unexpected paths. His transition from country star to horse breeder isn't a story of surrender. It's a story of growth, of recognizing that fulfillment comes in many forms. The enduring power of Carl Smith's legacy lies not just in what he achieved, but in what he proved was possible. He demonstrated that you can step away from fame without losing your identity, that you can discover new dreams after fulfilling your first ones, that sometimes the bravest decision is choosing happiness over a cloud. So next time someone asks whatever happened to Carl Smith, tell him he didn't disappear. He simply found a different kind of spotlight. One that illuminated green pastures instead of stage floors, family gatherings instead of fan gatherings, a life lived exactly as he wished to live it. In doing so, he created his greatest masterpiece, a life story proving that success isn't measured by how many people recognize your name, but by staying true to yourself regardless where that truth leads you. That's not just a country music lesson, that's a universal truth. And in the end, isn't that what country music has always been about?